Vicki, it's awesome to have you with me today. We were able to connect a couple times prior to this, so it's been really, really fun and a good time to get to understand and know a little bit more about your journey, as we were talking. And I'm glad that you came on to share with others what you experienced and how you're helping others in their lives as well. So let's just start off with you sharing, Vicki, who are you? What are you doing today? And then I like to go backwards and you can explain how you got to where you are today.
It's interesting, John, and thank you for having me. I'm really so pleased to be here. Uh, it's interesting that my mission, since I started it a few months ago to get my message out there, has really kind of evolved and changed a little bit, which I wasn't expecting. More insights have come and experiences talking with people like you and others. It's really kind of added to the experience and to the message. So I'm a product of a secular household, a secular city family in Los Angeles, which is where I was born and grew up. Even my grandparents thought people who believed in God and an afterlife were foolish and weak. But somewhere along the line, I decided that a higher power made a lot of sense, that everything we see around us could not have just come about on its own. But I hadn't taken that belief system very far. So now we can go to my story as it relates to the message. And that is that I lost my husband, Sam, of almost 22 years to cancer in 2019. And I expected to be kind of lost, even though I'm a survivor type. I expected to be lost for a while after he passed, but it didn't happen that way. Instead, even on the day he passed, I was flooded with optimism. It was unseemly, really. My first instinct was to push it away. I thought, what's all this about? But then it occurred to me that I'd been strong during our 2-year ordeal from his diagnosis to his passing, and that I'd taken good care of him at the end, which isn't really something I'm good at, but I made sure I was good at it for this instance. So I thought, if good things want to come my way, maybe I should let them. And it turned out to be the best decision I could have made, because all kinds of great things started happening after that. Strange occurrences, serendipitous things, almost like they might have been messages from Sam or from God, started happening. Opportunities started coming my way to do things that I might not have gotten to do otherwise. Let's see. Oh, insights were coming my way. In fact, some of the best ones came after I published my book, To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief, which I wrote about 2 years after Sam passed, because I wanted to tell the story of all the wonderful things that had happened to me after Sam passed, in order to help others. And so I came a long way from my secular upbringing to believing fully in God and an afterlife. And one of the serendipitous things that happened was someone very soon after Sam passed, someone recommended that I read the story of a secular neurosurgeon who had been in a coma for 7 days because of a brain infection he had. His colleagues were taking care of him in the hospital. And he had a near-death experience that he describes in quite a bit of detail. And something about that story brought me the rest of the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife. And it changed everything for me. The only downside of all this is my family doesn't know what to do with me anymore. A lot of them have kind of written me off. But I know I'm on the right path, and it's pretty incredible how you can withstand distance from family members and other things that mean a lot to you if you know you're on the right path and doing the right thing. And I attribute that to God's presence in my life, which I have only really fully recognized that presence for the last couple of years. So I've come a long way. And I did want to tell you what one of the best insights was that came to me. And this is how my message has evolved, because I really thought the story of all these wonderful things that happened to me was the story. That was the message, to help others. But I have a more powerful one now. And that is that if you believe in a loving God and an exquisite afterlife, and that God has a plan for each one of us, and that maybe that plan, in my case, it's pretty obvious to me, was for Sam to pass ahead of me. God has a plan for me to do more things on this earth while I'm still here. Maybe get this message out to the world, to learn things, to teach things. And then I will join Sam later. And one of the great things is I have experienced something that lets me know that Sam is around. God actually confirmed that for me, and I can tell that story if you'd like. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, the evolution of the message. And I really think that if people can sort of reject the cultural conditioning that tells us to think of death and loss and even common disappointments that upset us so much as tragic, if we can resist that and see these episodes in life for what they really are, meaning the chance to learn new things that God wants us to learn, then we don't have to think of these adversities that we all experience from time to time as tragic, even the passing of a beloved spouse.
Yeah, and that you said a lot, right, in all that the message you had there. So I just want to go backwards a little bit, and what kind of opportunities were showing up for you that you mentioned?
Oh, well, some friends said to me, for example, it's the holidays. You seem to be spending quite a bit of your time by yourself. Why don't you come to our karaoke group? You don't have to sing, but it's a great group of people that we think you'd really like to meet and hang out with. So I went to the karaoke group, not intending to sing, but I noticed that everybody was eating and drinking and gabbing, and no one was paying any attention to the person singing. And I thought, well, this is pretty safe. Maybe I should, give they call it a karaoke jockey. Maybe I should give the karaoke jockey a song choice and, just try it out. So I did, but as soon as I started to sing, the room went sort of silent. And I don't know if it was because of my singing or because there was a new person on stage that most of them didn't know. This is a big room of maybe 100 people, So anyway, it turned out I could sing. I mean, I knew I could carry a tune, but my voice had no power. The more I sang karaoke, the stronger my voice got. People would give me little tips here and there, and I learned how to control, my breathing and my diaphragm and all that. And suddenly this great sound came out, and now I sing in public, Another thing that happened was I got an email from our local playhouse. They were having auditions for the staged reading. Now, I had been a theater reviewer in Long Beach, California for over 20 years on the side. It wasn't my career. I never got paid for it, but I did it for over 20 years. And so I knew theater, but I'd never acted before. And I thought, maybe someday I'll get to act. Well, the staged reading means there's scripts on stage. Anyway, not to get off on a big tangent, I did go to the audition for this thing, and I almost left because everyone who went before me sounded so polished and experienced. And here I was. Anyhow, I got the female lead. It was just, everything was sort of divinely inspired for at least a year after Sam passed. I traveled to an exotic place. I went on an Antarctica expedition cruise. Some friends decided to go with me. That got delayed for COVID, but eventually a couple of years later, we went. Just, things like that. And they were all successful that first year. Everything worked out in my favor. So, yeah, those were the kinds of things that happened. As far as the strange occurrences that happened after Sam passed, actually, a couple of them happened right before he passed, but after he passed, a couple of months later, I gave him 2 celebrations of life. One in LA, where we had the people who'd known us the longest. There would be the most people at that one. But before I did that one, we had moved to Arizona for retirement, and in small town Arizona. And I decided we had met enough people, even though we hadn't been here very long, that it warranted a celebration of life here. It wound up 48 people were coming. So I couldn't have it at our house. I had it at a venue. And I was on my way there about 45 minutes before the celebration of life. And suddenly there's this cartoonish little blue car in front of me. Now, Sam had loved sunflowers. It was his favorite flower. It was the only flower he really loved. He loved them. And I had made sure they would be on the tables at the celebration of life. Well, so I've got this cartoonish little blue car in front of me about a quarter mile from the venue. And up from the roof of this car was a plastic flower. And it was bent back toward me so I could see it wasn't just any flower. It was a plastic sunflower. What were the chances of that less than an hour before Sam's first celebration of life?
Yeah,
it just seemed,
yeah.
It was too much. I mean, I just thought, I've had a lot of coincidences happen in my life, as has everyone, but that was too much. I mean, it was hard to believe it was just mere coincidence. Probably the most stunning thing that's happened since Sam passed is when I go to bed at night and turn out the light, about 3 to 5 minutes later, usually, sometimes longer, but I haven't fallen asleep yet. And this smoky grayish white thing started to appear kind of in my view in the dark. And most of the time it was so subtle I wasn't sure it was really there. But a few times it appeared so vivid that I thought, there's something there. And I said, Sam, is that you, sweetie? And I didn't get an answer, but it would just kind of float around gently or kind of go in and out like that gently. After a few months, it changed color. It changed to a neon yellow green, like this really limey yellow green color, and really beautiful, like sparkly almost. And I thought, maybe there is something there. I mean, the fact that it had changed color seemed pretty deliberate, but again, most of the time it was so subtle, I wasn't sure I was really seeing the thing. Well, after a year of this, and I had begun praying for the first time in my life, I talked to God every single night, and I didn't feel comfortable praying for myself, so I'd pray for others or for our country or for whatever I could think that warranted my prayers, and I just talked to God about things. Well, one day, about a year after Sam passed, I had grown weary of wondering if the neon yellow green thing was some kind of manifestation of Sam's soul visiting me. So I said to God, I'm going to ask you for a favor, God. And I know I never ask you for something for myself, but I'm going to break that rule today. And tonight, when I go to sleep, I want you to make, if this is Sam, I want you to make the neon yellow green thing appear different like strikingly different, like more vivid or move differently or whatever it is to let me know that this is Sam. And if it hasn't been Sam all this time, just give me jet black, which would sort of be the definite absence of the phenomenon. And if it appeared the way, if whatever you see at night in the dark just appears the way it usually does, I just figured that would tell me that God had chosen not to do as I'd asked, and I'd be no worse off. So that night, when I'm getting ready for bed, I'm thinking, what have I done? What if I get jet black? Am I ready to find out this hasn't been Sam all this time? But the deed was done, and, you can't stay up forever. So I went to bed and I turned out the light. And instead of waiting 3 to 5 minutes to appear, this time, the apparition, I guess, was there immediately. And it was so vivid. And instead of gently going back and forth, floating around or kind of going in and out, it frantically shot across my view horizontally about 4 or 5 times inside of a second or two, and then gone. So I burst into tears and thanked God for confirming that it was Sam. And I was convinced that God had confirmed that the visits are from Sam. And it's almost 5 years later, the end of this month, as a matter of fact, it'll be 5 years since Sam passed, and I still get these visits almost every night.
Wow. Yeah.
So
you have some pretty amazing opportunities, experiences that have changed your life since he's been passed. Yeah, it's incredible. I'm curious too how, you didn't go into depression. You were more optimistic, as you said, and I don't, is there a way you can explain that might have happened to you?
It felt like early on, maybe it was even the day Sam passed, it was like a helping hand was coming down. Think of it from my point of view. I'd never had an experience of God before. I barely believed in God and an afterlife up to this point. So a helping hand just seemed like a helping hand. It didn't even occur to me right away, maybe this was God. It just seemed like something was helping me. And I thought my first instinct was to believe that it was Sam. I thought, Sam's over there helping me do better than I otherwise would have. But I no longer believe that. I believe it was God, and that it still is in some instances. So, that was kind of serendipitous too, because I don't go there mentally, or I didn't at the time. A helping hand, It just didn't compute for me, given my secular upbringing and my rudimentary belief up to that point in God and an afterlife. So it was very new to me, but it occurred to me. I thought, something's helping me. Something or someone is helping me. So that's interesting. And I never, until you asked that, I hadn't really thought of how unusual it would be for someone like me to have gone there mentally right away as soon as I felt it happening. Yeah. So that's what happened. And it's not that I didn't grieve, but I grieved far more optimistically than I expected to because of all the help I was getting. And I guess you could say that help was coming from God and Sam. Sam was visiting me, at night after I'd turn out the lights, and God was helping me in other ways by presenting all these possibilities for this fantastic next chapter of life. And what people don't consider, and I'll just say it because it's true, even though it sounds a little like maybe it doesn't offer enough deference to those who have passed. But, that next chapter of life offers things that maybe you can't do otherwise. You know, everyone in a marriage or a committed relationship of any kind defers certain of their wants and desires to compromise because there's another person in your life. They're compromising for you and you're compromising for them. And here was an opportunity, not that I would ever choose for Sam to have passed, but since he had, I thought, okay, this is like a plan B, a next best thing opportunity for me, since I don't have any choice about Sam having passed to the afterlife and being left here in my home by myself. I really can start thinking about things that I want to do that maybe I couldn't have done if Sam had lived. It's not my choice, but not my first choice, but it can be a really exciting life if you look at it that way. So many people grieve so hard and so long. And given that we've already established that if you believe in God and an afterlife, the passing of a loved one need not be thought of as tragic. They just passed ahead of you, and you have other things to do before you join them. I think it's a really important concept. People who are religious tend to nod knowingly when I say this to them. Yet that cultural conditioning seems to keep even those people from connecting the dots and saying, yeah, you know, maybe it's not terrible. Maybe they're the lucky ones because they're going to this beautiful place sooner than later. I mean, there are all kinds of ways of thinking of it that are opposed to the awfulization, the cultural awfulization of death and loss and of disappointment in general. I think this is another insight that came to me. And I know I'm monopolizing this conversation, John, but I think that disappointment that causes us sadness for any length of time, I think the message fits that too, because I now believe that God has a plan for every adversity we face, plan to teach us lessons. And it finally got through my thick skull some time ago that if I just learn the lessons sooner, God will stop trying to teach me that particular lesson and I'll stop suffering so much. My biggest one is impatience. I'm kind of a type A impatient person. Sam had no luck trying to cure me of it when he was alive, but now I want him to be proud of me and I have an extra incentive. And I have conquered, I'll never conquer all of it, but I've conquered a lot of it. And God, I've noticed, has stopped giving me so many irritations in life that have brought out my impatience. And I think it's because I've learned a lot and taken it to heart and conquered about 80% of it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I'm also curious too, what would you say to somebody that would be heading towards that road of depression and because they lost someone, or they might be thinking that it's coming up, right? It's ahead of them in the future sometime soon. You know, what would you say to them to kind of like, I guess, get in the feeling, the beliefs and the opportunities that might come their way like it did for you?
Well, I do have some tips for survivors of these kinds of adverse events. But I would also recommend some free audio episodes that I will offer at the end, if that's all right with you, John, because those expand on some of the insights that I have presented here today already. And I think they're free. You can get them at inspiredgrief.com. They are wonderful for getting you to really see how to think of death and loss, adversity, God's plan, disappointment, profound disappointment in a completely different way that I've kind of introduced today, but haven't really expanded upon. The audio episodes are 12 to 15 minutes each. There are 3 of them. And I would highly recommend them. All you have to do, it takes 20 seconds to just go to inspiredgrief.com and put in your first name and your email address, and that will get you those episodes. But the tips I have too, and I think this really worked well for me, and I would at the very least suggest people try it. And that was that I struck a balance between what I call activity and alone time. The activities being all these new things like going to karaoke, being in that staged reading at the Playhouse, traveling a bit, just, lunch with a friend, whatever. Those are activities. A lot of people told me, and I'm sure they tell others, that, after someone passes to the afterlife, they told me, keep yourself as busy as possible so you don't have time to think or feel. As well-intended as that advice was, I rejected it. I completely ignored it because I knew that there was some processing I needed to do, processing of what had happened to my life. It's not just a loss of the person. And again, I'm not sure loss is the right word because Sam's still around. But what's happening to your life, there are changes. And as human beings, we're kind of afraid of the unknown and of uncertainty. And suddenly you're alone in your home that you shared with someone, yesterday or the day before. And so there's an unknown there. And we're always a little bit, we don't accept that real well at first. So you have to process what's happened to your life. So the alone time is for processing. And if you strike the right balance, and I kind of instinctively knew what it should be, it really helped me to have a lot of fun doing these activities while processing the changes to my life. And it got me through that first few months with a minimum of pain. And I had lost the love of my life. There was nobody who I respected more, who I loved more than Sam. He was the best. He was almost a near perfect human being. I mean, this is a guy who believed in doing the right thing in every circumstance, no matter what sacrifice he had to make to do the right thing. And as far as I could see, in knowing him for 24 years, I never saw him do anything but the right thing. So he was fantastic, and he was very funny too. So it was a great combination within one person. So yeah, strike that balance and see if it doesn't work for you. Have some fun. People think that souls in the afterlife are judging them. So many people feel guilty about moving on right away. They think, okay, maybe eventually, I can justify it. But for now, I really have to kind of keep to myself and grieve because, there's so many have-tos that people think. Well, one of the things, and this came from the story of the neurosurgeon who had the coma for 7 days, who was in the coma for 7 days. And I read his story of his near-death experience. He didn't say this, but I sort of extrapolated it from some things I read in his story. And what was I going to say? Now I can't remember what it was. Oh, okay. So I know. Souls in the afterlife don't experience negative emotions. I think we can be pretty certain of that. And the reason I say that is because when I read his near-death experience, he talks about this all-encompassing, unbelievable love that surrounds you when you're in the afterlife that it is incomprehensible to us here on earth. That's how powerful it is. So I extrapolated that to mean that, okay, the body dies, the brain dies along with it, the soul is left to go to the afterlife, is surrounded by this unbelievable love. There are no negative emotions like anger, fear, jealousy in the afterlife. So souls in the afterlife, having been perfected in this way, see only the good. They only want what will make the ones that they loved and left behind the happiest and most fulfilled. I feel very strongly about that, even though I can't prove it. So people who grieve because they feel they have to for a particular length of time, or who feel guilty moving on with a new person, with a new relationship. One woman told me that she felt self-conscious after her husband passed about starting a new relationship, because what if it became a sexual relationship, and what if he was watching from the afterlife? And I said, he's watching. Don't let it bother you. He's cheering you on. And I explain more about that in the audio episodes as well. So, yeah. And you know what? I was open. I made myself open to that guidance I was receiving from the helping hand and to the new opportunities that were coming my way. Yeah, it seemed like maybe it was too soon, but I thought, well, maybe they're coming to me at this time for a reason. And now I know that I did the right thing by just embracing all the good that was coming my way. And others should too.
Yeah, they all should. But I guess it depends on how people look at it. So, I know you mentioned the audio. Do you have anything else or another website or something people can go to connect?
Yes. Wow, this went fast. Are we all almost done already?
You're good.
That's okay. Okay, so my book is sort of a roadmap or example of how to move on after losing a loved one, how to move on brilliantly. It's my story, and it's called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. And inspired grief is kind of an oxymoron, but well, I've told you pretty much what I experienced after Sam passed. I thought inspired grief kind of described it. So I stuck with that, and I have discounted the price at my domain as well. So for discounted pricing on the book, go to inspiredgrief.com/book. The audio episodes, they're free. Go get them now before you forget to subscribe. inspiredgrief.com. All you have to do is put in first name and email address, and those audio episodes are yours. And I strongly encourage you to get those, even if you haven't lost someone recently. We all will eventually. And as I said, this message applies to common everyday adversity and disappointments that throw us and affect our lives. Okay. And I do have a website too, VickiParisGoodman.com. That website has some blog articles I've written that are kind of fun and insightful. So that's it.
That's great. Yeah, so you shared a lot, and I'm glad that everything's worked out for you with your journey, after losing your husband and everything, and you got to experience some great opportunities. And I'm sure there's plenty more to come. And you sharing your message to others in the hopes that they don't get in that depression mode and they can see opportunities and stuff coming their way as well. So I asked one question to everybody at the end, what are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
Well, I kind of gave them already, to be open to guidance that might be coming your way. You might feel something like that helping hand that I experienced. If it was available to me, why wouldn't it be available to others? Be open to opportunities that come your way. Maybe they're coming your way for a reason. And strike a balance between activity and alone time. I described that in detail. I think it's important. That actually got put to the test, John. COVID came upon us all just a few months after Sam passed, and I was doing so well. But suddenly, we were all kind of housebound for the most part, not entirely, but we were spending a lot more time at home, sort of isolated from people than we were used to. And it had been only a few months, as I said, after Sam passed. And I suffered 3 depressions during those first few months of COVID. They each lasted precisely 10 days, which is kind of odd, I guess. But yeah, they were profound. I would just sit in my living room staring out the window, feeling so sad. And I thought, this is because that wonderful balance I'd achieved got upset. Suddenly there wasn't enough activity. It was all alone time, and it was too much. So maybe there are some lessons to learn from that experience too.
Yeah, I could see that. You were starting to build in a routine of kind of getting out there doing things, and then you just like shut down right away. Yeah.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but sounds like you got through it. You want it coming out better on the other end. So
Yep.
Vicki, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey, and hopefully it helps others that listen to this as well.
Oh, I sure hope so. And thank you so much for having me, John. You've been wonderful to me. You've treated me so well, and I'm very grateful.
You're welcome. Thank you.